So here's the thing about the Galactic Military Academy. When you gather 200 different species from across 14 star systems and try to teach them all how to fight, someone is eventually going to do something catastrophically stupid. That's just statistics. But when Cadet Blorgax, a Glorpian with the situational awareness of a concussed hamster, managed to shoot himself in 3 of his 7 eyes with a foam dart during basic training, the entire Galactic Council lost their collective minds. They didn't just ban foam darts. Oh no. That would have been reasonable. Instead, they banned every single projectile weapon in existence. Bullets, arrows, throwing knives, slingshots, rocks tied to sticks, probably even aggressive frisbee throwing if they'd thought about it. The official memo, which was 47 pages long because aliens apparently get paid by the word, declared all kinetic projectile weapons to be, quote, primitive instruments of excessive and uncontrollable violence, unquote. I'm Jake Thompson, by the way. The only human in advanced combat theory, class Epsilon 7, and yes, before you ask, it's exactly as fun as it sounds, being the representative of a species most of the galaxy considers to be enthusiastic but slightly unhinged newcomers. Our instructor, Commander Vril, is a tentaculan from the Phosphor Cluster. Picture an octopus that went to law school, developed a personality disorder about following rules, and somehow gained the ability to make every sentence sound like a funeral dirge. He's got 11 tentacles, which he uses primarily for gesturing dramatically and holding multiple copies of the regulation handbook simultaneously. Cadets, Vril announced that morning, his voice like gravel being pushed through a synthesizer. Tomorrow you will face your final combat examination. You will demonstrate proficiency with approved energy-based weaponry. You will follow protocol. You will not, under any circumstances, improvise. That last part, he said while looking directly at me. I gave him my most innocent smile. The one that definitely doesn't suggest I'm already planning something. The exam was worth 40% of our final grade. Fail it, and you got shipped back to your home planet with a participation certificate and crippling shame. Pass it, and you moved on to officer candidacy. Pretty straightforward, except for one tiny problem. Energy weapons hate humans. Not metaphorically. Like, actually hate us. They're designed for species with heat-resistant skin, extra joints, or built-in cooling systems. The standard-issue plasma rifle weighs 40 pounds, requires you to hold it at an angle that dislocates human shoulders, and heats up to approximately the temperature of fresh lava after 3 shots. I'd spent 6 weeks trying to qualify with one, and had exactly 2 achievements to show for it. 3rd-degree burns on both palms and a new nickname. Everyone called me Crispy now. Very encouraging. I sat in the back of the classroom, watching my classmates practice with their weapons. Thorax, a crystalborn who looked like someone had taught a geode how to walk, was casually wielding a plasma cannon that could probably take out a small moon. Zila, who was technically classified as a sentient gas cloud with attitude problems, had somehow modified a disintegration beam to work with her particular physiology. And then there was me, trying to figure out how to hold a weapon designed for something with 4 arms and a completely different center of gravity without immediately setting myself on fire. You appear distressed, Jake Thompson, said a small, wet voice near my elbow. I looked down. Krieg, the Demolished, a mucosian who resembled a nervous pile of snot with eye stalks, was oozing concernedly in my direction. Despite looking like something you'd find in a sink drain, Krieg was actually my closest friend at the academy. Probably because we were both terrible at combat and excellent at paperwork. Distressed? Me? I'm fantastic, Krieg. I love knowing that tomorrow I'm going to fail out of the academy because I can't use a weapon literally designed to exclude my entire species. Perhaps you could file a formal complaint about discriminatory equipment standards, Krieg suggested hopefully. I could help you with the forms. There are only 93 pages. I appreciated the thought. But bureaucracy wasn't going to solve this problem. What I needed was something simple, something human, something that didn't require heat-resistant skin or extra appendages, something the Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, had just made completely illegal. As Commander Vril droned on about safety protocols and the importance of following regulations, I found myself staring at the furniture around me. The chairs, made from some kind of carbon fiber composite. The desks, with their reinforced structural supports. The decorative wall panels that were definitely load-bearing despite what the manual claimed. An idea began forming. A terrible, beautiful, definitely going to get me expelled idea. Krieg noticed my expression. His eye stalks quivered nervously. Jake Thompson, you have the face of someone planning a violation. Krieg, buddy, I said quietly. How do you feel about staying after class tonight? I feel very negative about wherever this question is leading. Good instinct, I said, grinning. You're going to hate what I'm about to ask you to do. After class ended, I stayed behind on the pretext of needing extra practice time. Commander Vril gave me a look that suggested he thought I was finally taking things seriously, which just shows how little he understood about humans in general, and me specifically. The moment his tentacles slithered out the door, I got to work. But first, let me explain exactly why energy weapons are humanity's natural enemy. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been in the firing range trying to qualify with the plasma rifle. The safety instructor, a 6-armed hexapoid named Instructor Krill, had demonstrated the proper stance. Step 1. Grip the forward stabilizer with your primary left manipulator. Step 2. Brace the stock against your secondary shoulder mount. Step 3. Use your mid-right arm to activate the cooling chamber while your primary right operated the trigger. Instructor Krill, I'd said, raising my hand. Humans only have 2 arms. She'd stared at me with all 6 of her compound eyes. That seems like a design flaw. Yeah, well, take it up with evolution. The rifle was designed for the average galactic military species, which apparently meant having somewhere between 4 and 8 limbs, skin that could handle temperatures that would cook a human like a rotisserie chicken, and a complete disregard for basic physics as I understood it. When I'd finally managed to lift the thing and fire it, the recoil had knocked me flat on my back, and the heat discharge had singed off my eyebrows. Both of them. They'd grown back weird, and now one was permanently higher than the other, giving me a constant expression of skeptical surprise. Zila had found this hilarious. Your species travels through space, she'd said, her gaseous form rippling with what I assumed was laughter, but cannot handle a simple energy weapon. How did you even survive your own evolution? Spite, I'd told her, and an unreasonable amount of throwing rocks at things, which actually brought me to my current plan. See, the Galactic Council had banned projectile weapons after the Glorpian incident, but they'd specifically cited lasers, plasma, and disintegration technology as the approved alternatives. The entire 47-page memo was about kinetic energy being primitive and dangerous and unpredictable. They'd used the word primitive 83 times. I'd counted. But here's what they'd forgotten. Humans got really, really good at primitive. We'd had 5,000 years of practice with bows, another couple thousand with crossbows. We'd literally conquered entire continents with pointed sticks and string. And unlike plasma rifles that required advanced degrees in xenophysics to operate, a crossbow just needed tension, leverage, and a complete disregard for what furniture was technically supposed to be used for. I picked up one of the classroom chairs, examining its construction. Carbon fiber frame, reinforced stress points, designed to hold up to 800 pounds. Perfect. Jake Thompson, I must protest. Krieg oozed from the doorway, where he'd been serving as lookout. This violates approximately 14 regulations, possibly 15. I would need to check subsection 7 of the equipment tampering clause. Krieg, my friend, let me ask you something. What's more important, following the rules, or me not getting shipped back to Earth with a failure on my record? His eye stalks drooped. The rules are more important. However, I also do not wish for you to leave, as you are my only friend who does not refer to me as Slime Boy. Exactly. So you're going to help me commit some light furniture destruction, and in exchange, I won't tell anyone about that time you accidentally filed your combat assessment under poetry submissions. Krieg made a sound like a sigh filtered through mucus. You are a terrible person, Jake Thompson. I'm a practical person. There's a difference. I grabbed a chair and started unscrewing the legs. The Academy's furniture was overbuilt to handle the weight and abuse of 200 different alien physiologies, which meant it was basically made from materials you could build a spacecraft out of. The legs came off clean, each one about 18 inches long, straight, and surprisingly balanced. These'll work as bolts, I muttered, lining up 3 of them on a desk. Now I need something for the bow itself. The desks had reinforced crossbeams underneath, designed to prevent them from collapsing under stress. I crawled under one, examining the construction. With the right leverage and maybe a complete lack of concern for property damage, I could probably snap one free. Krieg, I need you to stand on top of this desk. Why? Weight distribution. Just trust me. Those are the 2 most frightening words in the human language, Krieg said. But he oozed up onto the desk anyway. With his weight pressing down, I got underneath and started working on the crossbeam. It took 10 minutes of grunting, swearing, and probably some impressive joint damage, but eventually the beam came free with a satisfying crack. I rolled out from under the desk, holding my prize. It was about 3 feet long, flexible but strong, with mounting points on each end. Behold, the basis of humanity's greatest contribution to warfare. The stick. I remain unconvinced this plan will succeed, Krieg said. That's because you're smart. Luckily, I'm just crazy enough to try it anyway. Next problem. Bowstring. I needed something with high tensile strength that could handle repeated stress. I looked around the classroom. The hologram projectors had cable systems. The equipment harnesses in the lockers had reinforced straps. And the wall panels, I'd noticed, had some kind of fiber weave in their construction. This was going to be a long night. 2 hours later, the classroom looked like a tornado had fought a furniture store and lost. I'd dismantled 3 chairs, 2 desks, and 1 decorative wall panel that definitely wasn't decorative anymore. Krieg had spent most of that time oozing back and forth between the door and my workspace, oscillating between lookout duty and what I can only describe as nervous hovering. "Jake Thompson, someone is approaching from the west corridor," he whispered urgently. I froze, holding a chair leg in one hand and a plasma torch in the other. Yes, I'd found a plasma torch. No, I wasn't supposed to have access to one. In my defense, the equipment locker had terrible security. We waited in silence. Footsteps echoed past. Some kind of chittering conversation in a language I didn't recognize. Then nothing. "False alarm," Krieg oozed. It was merely Cadet Thorax returning to retrieve his forgotten crystalline supplementation tablets. "You're going to give yourself an ulcer, buddy. If your species can get ulcers. Can you get ulcers? I do not know, but I suspect I am developing one currently." I went back to work. The crossbeam from the desk became the main body, what would have been called the stock on a traditional crossbow. I'd carved a groove down the center for the bolt to sit in, using the plasma torch on its lowest setting. My hands were steady, which was weird considering I was basically committing academic suicide if this didn't work. The bow itself was trickier. I needed something that could flex and return to shape without snapping. The chair legs were too rigid, but the support struts from the wall panel had this interesting flexible quality. I selected 2 of them, each about 18 inches long, and began the delicate process of mounting them perpendicular to the stock. "Hand me that mounting bracket," I said, gesturing to the pile of hardware I'd liberated from various pieces of furniture. Krieg extended a pseudopod and passed it over. "I have been calculating the probability of success for this endeavor." "Yeah, what'd you come up with?" "Approximately 4%, with a 7% margin of error. So you're saying there's a chance?" "That is a very optimistic interpretation of the data, Jake Thompson." The brackets clicked into place. Now came the fun part. Bowstring. I'd pulled apart 3 equipment harnesses, extracting the high-tensile cables used for carrying heavy gear during field exercises. The cables were made from some kind of polymer that could supposedly hold 3,000 pounds of force. I just needed to braid them together into something that could handle the stress of repeated firing. My fingers worked the cables, weaving them over and under in a pattern my grandfather had taught me back on Earth. He'd been big into survival stuff, always going on about how civilization was one bad day away from collapse and everyone should know how to make rope. At the time, I'd thought he was paranoid. Now, at a military academy 70 light-years from home, his paranoia was paying off. "Tell me something, Krieg. In all those regulations you've memorized, is there anything specifically about making weapons from classroom furniture?" His eye stalks perked up slightly. "I would need to review the complete text, but I do not recall any clause addressing improvised medieval projectile devices constructed from educational materials." "That's what I thought. See, the council banned projectile weapons. But this isn't a weapon yet. Right now it's just repurposed furniture arranged in an interesting configuration. That seems like a loophole." "Krieg, my friend, humans invented loopholes. We've been finding ways around rules since we figured out fire was against cave regulations." The braided cable stretched between the 2 ends of the bow arms. I tied it off, testing the tension. It held. I pulled harder. Still holding. I put my full strength into it, and the bow bent back with a deeply satisfying creak. "Okay, that'll work," I said, slightly out of breath. Now for the trigger mechanism. This was the part I'd been worried about. A crossbow needs a way to hold the string at full draw and release it cleanly. Too much friction and the bolt goes nowhere. Too little and the whole thing falls apart. I needed something precise. I found it in a broken hologram projector, buried in the equipment salvage bin. The projection system was fried, but the focusing mechanism was intact. A small servo motor, a release catch, and a trigger assembly that probably cost more than my entire education. "They just throw this stuff away?" I muttered, carefully extracting the mechanism. "The Academy has an extensive budget for equipment replacement," Krieg explained. "It is more cost-effective to dispose and reorder than to repair. That's the most wasteful thing I've ever heard, and I'm from a planet that invented planned obsolescence. I mounted the trigger assembly to the underside of the stock, running a thin cable from the catch to the bowstring. It took 40 minutes of fiddling, several curse words in 3 languages, and one near disaster when the servo motor almost fired prematurely. But eventually I had a working trigger. The crossbow was complete. It looked absolutely ridiculous. The stock was clearly a desk crossbeam. The bow arms were obviously wall panel struts. The string was literally woven equipment cables. The whole thing screamed homemade in a way that would make any self-respecting weapons engineer weep. I loved it. Krieg, we need to test this thing. We absolutely should not test this thing. You're probably right, but I'm going to anyway. I loaded one of the chair leg bolts into the groove, drew back the string until the catch engaged, and aimed at the far wall. The target was a decorative banner celebrating the Academy's 300th anniversary. "Sorry, Commander Vril," I muttered, and squeezed the trigger. The servo released. The string snapped forward. The bolt flew across the room and punched clean through the banner, embedding itself in the wall behind with a solid thunk that echoed through the empty classroom. Krieg and I stared at the impact point in silence. "Jake Thompson," Krieg said slowly, "I believe you may have just created something extraordinarily dangerous and probably very illegal." I grinned. "Yeah, I really did. What do we do now?" Now we clean up this mess, hide the evidence, and tomorrow I'm going to pass that combat exam using 5,000 years of human ingenuity and spite. I have increased my ulcer probability estimate to 60%. That's the spirit, buddy. That's the spirit. Morning came too fast. I'd spent half the night hiding furniture, debris, and the other half not sleeping because I was either excited or terrified. Possibly both. The crossbow was wrapped in my gear bag, looking innocent and definitely not like a flagrant violation of intergalactic weapons policy. The combat arena was packed. Every instructor in the academy had shown up to watch the final exams, which meant I had an audience for what was either going to be my greatest triumph or my most spectacular failure. There was no middle ground here. Commander Vril stood at the center of the arena, all 11 tentacles gesturing dramatically as he launched into his pre-exam speech. "Cadets, today you demonstrate the culmination of your training. You will show precision. You will show discipline. You will utilize approved energy-based weapon systems in accordance with Galactic Military Standard 734-B. He went on like this for another 10 minutes. I stopped listening after the 3rd time he said protocol. The obstacle course was set up in front of us. Holographic enemies would spawn at random intervals. Hit them all within the time limit. Pass. Miss too many. Fail. Simple enough. Except the holograms were designed to move unpredictably, and the course was full of cover that made energy weapons nearly useless at range. Thorax went first. His plasma cannon lit up the arena like a small sun, and he systematically obliterated every target with crystalline precision. The instructors nodded approvingly. Thorax bowed, which for a walking geode involved a concerning grinding noise. Zila went next. She dispersed herself across 3 separate positions simultaneously, firing disintegration beams from multiple angles. Show off. She completed the course in 40 seconds flat. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the starting line, gear bag over my shoulder. Commander Vril's eye stalks focused on me with what I can only describe as preemptive disappointment. "Cadet Thompson, please present your weapon for inspection." This was the moment. I reached into my bag and pulled out the crossbow. The silence was immediate and total. Every instructor stared. Every cadet stared. Even the holographic enemies seemed to pause mid-spawn, though that might have been my imagination. Commander Vril's tentacles slowly tied themselves into what looked like a very confused knot. "Cadet Thompson," he said, his voice strangled. "What is that?" "It's a crossbow, sir. Technically classified as a tension-based kinetic projectile device utilizing mechanical advantage for force multiplication. That is a stick. It's an advanced stick, sir." One of his tentacles pointed accusingly at the bow arms. "Is that a wall panel?" "Was a wall panel, sir. Now it's a crucial component of my approved examination weapon. There is nothing approved about this. This is furniture. You have made a weapon from furniture. The regulations banned projectile weapons, sir. They didn't say anything about creatively repurposed educational materials." I checked. Krieg helped. I glanced at the crowd and spotted Krieg, who had somehow managed to ooze down into a smaller, less noticeable puddle. Vril's tentacles were now in a full Gordian knot situation. Another instructor, a vaporous named Senior Instructor Quill, floated over. "Commander, technically the cadet has a point. The ban specifically references manufactured projectile weapons. There's no clause addressing improvised devices. That is because no sane being would think to make a weapon from classroom furniture. Yet here we are, I said helpfully. Vril made a sound like a tea kettle having an existential crisis. Fine. Fine. You may proceed, Cadet Thompson. But when you fail spectacularly, and you will fail, I am personally writing the recommendation for your dismissal. Understood, sir. I appreciate the confidence. I stepped up to the starting line. The course timer began. Holographic enemies spawned, and I went to work. The first target appeared 30 meters out. I loaded a bolt, raised the crossbow, and fired in one smooth motion. The bolt flew straight and true, passing through the hologram's center mass. Direct hit. 2 more targets. 2 more bolts. 2 more hits. The crossbow's reload time was maybe 3 seconds. Faster than any energy weapon I'd tried. No heat buildup. No power cell to manage. Just draw, load, aim, fire. Simple. Effective. Primitive. Perfect. Targets kept spawning. I kept shooting. The bolts punched through holograms with satisfying accuracy. Somewhere in the background I heard an instructor say, "How is the primitive kinetic device so effective?" Because humans had been doing this since before we invented the wheel. That's how. The course timer hit 2 minutes. I'd eliminated 47 targets without missing once. The energy weapon record was 39. Commander Vril's tentacles had achieved a level of knottedness that probably violated several laws of physics. Then the surprise element activated. A combat drone descended from the ceiling. Real, not holographic. Heavily armored with adaptive shielding designed to analyze and counter incoming fire. Every energy weapon in the galaxy couldn't touch it once those shields calibrated. The other cadets had failed this part universally. Thorax's plasma cannon had been absorbed. Zila's disintegration beam had scattered harmlessly. The drone's shields shimmered, scanning for threats. Analyzing energy signatures. Preparing countermeasures. I loaded a bolt. The thing about adaptive shielding is that it's designed for modern threats. Energy weapons, plasma, lasers. All the approved technology. Nobody had programmed it for a pointy stick moving at 200 feet per second. I fired. The bolt flew through the air, passed straight through the shields like they weren't even there, and punched into the drone's central processor. Sparks flew. The drone wobbled, made a sad electronic noise, and crashed to the arena floor. The silence was deafening, then chaos. For about 5 seconds, nobody moved. The combat drone lay on the arena floor, sparking pathetically with a chair leg bolt sticking out of its central processor like the world's most budget flagpole. Then everyone started moving at once. "What just happened?" Commander Vril shrieked, his tentacles flailing in directions. I didn't think tentacles could physically go. Senior Instructor Kell floated closer to the destroyed drone, her gaseous form rippling with what might have been shock. "The shielding didn't register the projectile. It's pure kinetic energy. The system isn't programmed to counter obsolete threats." Obsolete. Vril's voice hit a pitch that probably shattered glass somewhere in the building. That cadet just destroyed a 50,000 credit training drone with furniture. Other instructors rushed into the arena. A hexapoid engineer started scanning the drone with multiple devices simultaneously. A crystalline tactical analyst was frantically taking notes. Somewhere in the back, I heard betting pools being settled in at least 4 languages. I just stood there, crossbow in hand, trying very hard not to smile. "Cadet Thompson." Vril's voice had gone quiet, which was somehow more terrifying than the shrieking. "Where did you acquire that weapon?" "End. Made it, sir, last night. Classroom 3. "You made it?" "Yes, sir." The furniture seemed structurally sound for repurposing. A vein I didn't know tentaculans had started throbbing on Vril's forehead. "You destroyed Academy property to construct an unauthorized weapon." "Technically, sir, I repurposed Academy property to construct an unregulated device. There's a distinction." That's when Krieg oozed forward, bless his slimy little heart. He was holding a datapad and quivering with either fear or conviction, possibly both. "Commander Vril, sir, if I may present evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Cadet Krieg. Evidence that Cadet Thompson has violated zero weapons regulations." Krieg's eye stalks were shaking, but his voice was steady. "I have reviewed all 47 pages of the projectile weapons ban, plus the 18 supplementary amendments, and the 6 addendums regarding approved combat examination equipment." Vril's tentacles tensed. "And? Nowhere in any regulation does it specifically prohibit improvised tension-based kinetic devices constructed from repurposed educational materials. The ban addresses manufactured projectile weapons. The examination rules specify approved energy weapons but do not explicitly forbid alternatives, only that cadets must, quote, demonstrate combat proficiency with available equipment, unquote. The crossbow was available equipment, I added helpfully. Just required some assembly, Krieg continued, gaining confidence. Furthermore, Academy Regulation 274-C states that cadets are encouraged to show initiative and creative problem-solving in combat scenarios. And Regulation 911-A specifically praises, quote, the adaptation of environmental resources for tactical advantage, unquote. Vril looked like he was experiencing several different types of system failure simultaneously. That regulation refers to using terrain features, not dismantling furniture. The regulation does not specify, sir. The hexapoid engineer looked up from the drone. Commander, I hate to say this, but the cadet's performance was exceptional. 47 targets eliminated, 0 misses, and successfully neutralized the adaptive defense drone. That's the highest score in the class by a significant margin. With a stick. An effective stick, sir. Vril turned to me, his tentacles slowly untangling into what I interpreted as resigned fury. Cadet Thompson, you are simultaneously awarded the highest marks in combat proficiency and written up for 17 safety violations, 12 counts of equipment tampering, and 1 count of creative insubordination. Is creative insubordination an official charge, sir? It is now. Senior Instructor Queel floated between us. Commander, regardless of the methods, we must acknowledge the tactical insight here. The cadet identified a critical flaw in our defensive systems. Modern warfare has become so focused on energy-based threats that we've forgotten kinetic weapons entirely. That's a dangerous oversight. Vril's tentacles drooped in defeat. I am writing a memo to the Galactic Council. Immediately. This will not happen again. Does that mean I passed, sir? You passed. You also created a bureaucratic nightmare that will take months to resolve. I hope you're proud of yourself. I grinned. Little bit, yeah. The other cadets were crowding around now, examining the crossbow with various appendages and sensory organs. Thorax's crystalline structure was refracting light in a pattern I'd learned meant he was impressed. Zila had condensed into a tight cloud of grudging respect. Human Jake made weapon from chair, Thorax rumbled. This is most Thorax thing Thorax has seen that was not done by Thorax. Your species is absolutely unhinged, Zila said. I mean that as a compliment. Krieg oozed up beside me, eye stalks wobbling with residual nervousness. Jake Thompson, I cannot believe that worked. Krieg, my friend. Never underestimate humanity's ability to find the most complicated solution to a simple problem. Or the simplest solution to a complicated problem. We're flexible like that. Commander Vril was already dictating his emergency memo to the council, his voice echoing across the arena. Furthermore, immediate amendment required to Regulation 734-B, to include specific language, prohibiting medieval weaponry, improvised or otherwise, furniture-based weapon systems, and any device that could be classified as, quote, a pointy stick with attitude, unquote. I looked at my crossbow, at the destroyed drone, at the scoreboard showing my name at the top of the class rankings. Yeah, I was definitely proud of myself. 3 days later, I was sitting in my dorm when Krieg oozed through the door, holding what looked like the entire Academy's printing budget worth of paperwork. Jake Thompson, you have achieved something remarkable. Yeah. Did my safety violation hearing get postponed again? Better. You have forced the Galactic Council into emergency session. He plopped the stack of documents onto my desk with a wet slapping sound. This is Commander Vril's official memo requesting immediate amendments to intergalactic weapons policy. It is 132 pages long. I flipped through it. Vril had been thorough. There were detailed schematics of my crossbow from 6 different angles, a complete breakdown of how I'd sourced the materials, psychological profiles suggesting humans might have a species-wide compulsion toward weaponizing furniture, and an entire section titled Why Traditional Projectile Weapons Represent an Unacceptable Paradigm Violation. He used the word primitive 147 times, Krieg said. I counted. That's almost twice as many as the original ban. I'm moving up in the world. The best part was buried on page 94, a subsection labeled Recommended Policy Additions that read like Vril had suffered a minor breakdown while writing it. Prohibited items now included: crossbows, longbows, shortbows, recurve bows, compound bows, slings, atlatals, catapults, trebuchets, ballistas, anything that could be classified as a siege weapon, pointed sticks, blunt sticks, sticks of any kind used for combat purposes, and, my personal favorite, any device operating on principles developed before the discovery of atomic energy. He's really committed to this, I said. The council is not pleased. Apparently your actions have inspired 14 other cadets across the galaxy to attempt similar improvisation. A Glorbanian cadet constructed a flamethrower from chemistry lab equipment. A Zentari cadet somehow weaponized a lunch tray. That's beautiful. I'm so proud. Krieg's eye stalks drooped. You have created chaos, Jake Thompson. I created opportunity, Krieg. There's a difference. The real kicker came a week later when the Academy released next semester's course catalog. Right there, between advanced plasma dynamics and tactical xenobiology, was a new elective. Human creative warfare. A case study in why we need better rules. The course description was amazing. An examination of human military history, improvisation tactics, and the species-specific tendency to violate the spirit of regulations while technically adhering to their letter. Focuses on identifying and closing loopholes in galactic military policy before humans find them. Prerequisites: basic combat theory, advanced bureaucracy, and a strong tolerance for frustration. Note: course inspired by actual events. Humans cannot enroll. I had it printed and framed. Commander Vril still wouldn't make eye contact with me in the corridors, which I considered a victory. My safety violations hearing had been postponed indefinitely because nobody could agree on what I'd actually violated. And my crossbow was now in the Academy Museum under a placard reading, "Evidence of why rules must be specific. The Thompson Incident." Krieg and I were walking to class when I spotted the new sign posted outside the equipment storage room. In 12 different languages, it read, "Furniture is for sitting, not for weapons." Yes, this means you, humans. They really think a sign is going to stop us, I said. Jake Thompson, please tell me you are not planning another incident. Me? Never. I'm a model cadet now. I paused. Although I did notice the chemistry lab has some interesting equipment configurations, and those lunch trays are surprisingly aerodynamic when you think about it. Krieg made a sound like a whimper filtered through gelatin. I am requesting a transfer. No, you're not. No, I am not, he admitted. But I am definitely developing that ulcer. I grinned. See, here's what the Galactic Council never understood about humans. You can write all the regulations you want. You can ban every weapon system ever invented. You can try to make everything safe and controlled and predictable. But humans have been finding creative ways around problems since we figured out that hitting things with rocks was more effective than hitting things with our fists. We've been turning the environment into weapons since before we had language. Give a human a problem and enough time, and we'll find a solution that's technically legal, completely insane, and probably shouldn't work but absolutely does. They banned projectile weapons for safety, so I made a crossbow from classroom furniture. And somewhere, in some academy classroom across the galaxy, another human cadet was probably looking at a chair right now and thinking the exact same thing I'd thought. The Galactic Council was going to need more regulations. A lot more regulations.